Good afternoon. If you guys will take your seats, we will start. I'm Carrie Watkins, the President and CEO of the Oklahoma City National Memorial and Museum, and welcome to this very special place. In 2020, we started a program called Better Conversations, and it brought people together, put their phones down, and this is February 19th, and 30 days later, the world turned upside down, and so we started doing them on Zoom or in big groups. And now we're back to convening small and big groups and doing this, and about to start a journey across the state to spread the hope we have found in the midst of tragedy. So we are honored to have you here today. We are an apolitical organization. We love all people, R's and D's and blues and reds, and we work with all people, and we represent all people. So we don't normally get into political discussions, but other groups here do, and we will honor that. And we are so proud to have the governor and his team and all the crew here today. So thank you guys for being here. About a year ago, I got a call from a girl named Louisa McCune, who had been popular publisher of a state magazine when my husband was in charge of tourism, and knew Louisa well. And she said, we need to support Better Conversations. And her Kirkpatrick Foundation wrote a large check to support this program over the last year. And we lost Louisa on Sunday morning or Saturday night to a long battle with cancer. And I just think it's fitting today she would be here and be so proud that this room is full of people talking about the hard things. And so I just wanted to pay a little tribute to her as we gather today. And then I just ask you to join me in a moment of silence to remember those who were killed, those who survived, and those changed forever on April 19th, 1995. Thank you so much. So I'm just going to go over the 5 grounding virtues of our Better Conversation, just so that you know what we believe in and what we talk about when we go around the state and around. Really, we do this around the country as well. But words matter. Humility is important. Generous listening, hospitality, patience, and adventurous civility. Those are all really important grounding virtues that we founded our Better Conversations in. And before we start those conversations, we just always ask people to raise their hand and to commit to honoring those virtues as we begin discussion. So if you're in for that, raise your hand, and we'll hold you to that. So we believe that there's no better time than to have some tough discussions as we enter a tough season of elections and hard discussions. We have to be able to come together and to do this and to realize that because you have one opinion and I have another, it doesn't make you right or me wrong or me right and you wrong. We just have different opinions. So we're proud to have everyone with us today. Judge Griffith, I'll turn it over to you. Welcome to Oklahoma City.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Carrie. It's an honor to be here today. I'm Judge Tom Griffith. For 15 years, I served on the United States Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit. So, yes, I am a swamp creature. Come to Oklahoma. But currently, I'm a fellow at the Wheatley Institute at Brigham Young University, which is one of the co-sponsors of the event today. And I'm spending my time, my research time, my writing time, my speaking time, trying to better understand how to support and defend the Constitution of the United States by pushing back against the toxic polarization that besets our nation. And I'm so grateful that we're here today being convened by Governor Stitt. This event flows out of an initiative that is called Disagree Better. It was an initiative by the National Governors Association, and Governor Stitt was one of the leaders of that initiative. I can't think of a more fitting place to be gathered to have this sort of discussion than in this sacred space, which must stand preeminent in our nation as a place dedicated to the idea that we can and must get along better with people with whom we disagree. This place, of all places that I've been to, represents the truth that we see in the Declaration of Independence, that we are all endowed by our Creator with inalienable rights, and that it's because of that we must treat one another with dignity and respect. So what we're going to do today is we're going to have several discussions led by experts from across the spectrum, all talking about how we can overcome toxic political polarization, and learn to disagree with one another better. We're Americans. We're gonna disagree. We better disagree. That's not the issue. The issue is, how do we disagree better? So you will see modeled here for you today people who have different viewpoints, but they will show you how we all can disagree better. Now, you have a role to play in this. You were handed a piece of paper as you came in that's called Program and Reflection Note Sheet. After each of the panels, I'm gonna ask you to look at this and ask you some questions that will cause hopefully some reflection, and maybe you can even jot them down. For those of you who are joining us online, there's a link on the page to get to the same sheet of paper. It won't be the sheet of paper for you, but it'll be online, and this will prod and inspire us, because at the end of the day, what this is about is how you and I can change, what we can do in our circle of influence, in our circle of concerns, to better demonstrate the type of charity that we ought to have one for another. So today's sessions will start with defining the problem, the unique problem that we're facing right now, and the unique opportunity that presents us. We'll then have a panel that will talk about how you work across political differences to create policy. We'll have a panel that talks about balancing freedom of speech and respect for others on university campuses. Then we'll have a panel that will talk about leadership and values and how faith traditions can help us disagree better. And then at the end, we're going to come back and have some specific, have specific suggestions for what you and I can do to get better at this. But first, it's my pleasure to introduce and turn the time over to a dear friend and a national leader in finding ways to help ease the divisions in our country. Tim Shriver is the CEO of the Special Olympics and the co-founder of Unite and the Dignity Index. And Tim will talk about the problem that besets us and the opportunity that it presents. So I'll turn my time over to Tim.
Thank you. This is not going to work. How about my big teacher voice? Is that going to be good enough? No. Okay. All right. Thank you, Judge Griffith, and thank you all for welcoming me. It's an honor to be here with a fellow swamp mate. Judge Griffith and I both hail from the East Coast. And I know we're not always welcome in Oklahoma, but I think we are today. And it's a great honor to be working under your leadership, your Judge, after decades serving our country from the bench with equanimity, with poise, with truth to your own principles, even when sometimes I might have disagreed with them. I think the respect that you earned from all sides of the aisle speaks to the issue that we're hoping to bring to the rest of the country. So I'm honored to be here. I'm honored to be a part of what's going on in this institute. I love those principles, Dr. Chambers, and I only hope we can maybe in the first edit get a chance to add dignity up into that, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. I'm just making a pitch for changing your fundamental principles, that's all. But no, more seriously, it's so important that this is happening here. Governor Stitt and Mrs. Stitt, I'm so honored to be back here in Oklahoma, to be in part trying to carry, Mrs. Stitt, your interest in hope for children. This is such a fundamental value and such a fundamental experience and skill, something I gave a good deal of my life to, figuring out how schools can be places that actually have a program around hope and purpose and belonging and trust. So I'm honored to be here in your following your example. And Governor Stitt, they talk about politics making strange bedfellows. Now, which of us is the strange one? That's the one. That's the thing I want to know. Or weird, or there's all sorts of new words going on in politics. But I do want to say that when it comes to finding common ground around what is important to our country, I don't think we have any separation. We may have a lot of separation on this issue or that, but not on what's most important for our country right now. And I can't tell you how honored I am. I tell everybody, I mean, people say, well, who are you working with? I say, Governor Kevin Stitt of the great state of Oklahoma. And they're like, you're kidding. I'm like, no, he's fantastic. So anyway, it's a great honor, really. And to be back here in this place, in this sacred space, as Judge Griffith said, is a huge honor. I don't believe in the many, many years since this tragedy took place that there were any words that made the great difference. President Lincoln told us over 100 years ago that it is not for those of us who stand on hallowed ground to add anything to the heart-wrenching sacrifice that those who died here experienced and those who survived them experienced. All we can do is dedicate ourselves to creating the country they wished they could have lived in. Those children, those moms, those dads, those workers hoped someday to be here. And they hoped to be in a country that they could be proud of, where they could raise their families, where it would be safe, where people would get along, where democracy would flourish. They hoped that we would have, that they would be able to see a country that they would be proud of. I come here from the East Coast. I'm not a native Oklahoman. I share a party with some in this room, not with others. I share a background, a skin color, a religion, a race, a national history story with some and not with others. But I grew up with parents who taught me that I could and should and must believe in America. My dad launched the Peace Corps from my backyard when I was a little boy. And volunteers came into our house, and what did they say? It was almost obvious that they thought that they could strengthen America by understanding people who were not Americans, by giving 2 years of their lives to living eye to eye and heart to heart with people who were enormously different from them in every way: language, culture, religion, race, tradition. They wanted to understand. And when they left our house, in came a wave of Special Olympics volunteers, because that was my mom's passion. She wanted to close institutions that had been created because we had humiliated people with intellectual and developmental differences, because we had failed to understand them, because we had not seen their dignity. And so she said, come volunteers into my house. We're going to play games and try to heal the wounds that arise when we get each other wrong. Because if she had one conviction, it was that when we looked as a country at a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old with Down syndrome, we didn't see them as they were. We saw only a caricature, only a shadow, only a label. And when we see only caricatures and shadows and labels, we get each other wrong. Now, the choice is ours. We live in a time, in my view, that has its own virus. And I'm not using that language because it's trendy. I'm using it because it's powerful. The virus, in our view, is contempt. It has grown up. It has seeded itself in our minds, and I dare say in our hearts. It tells us we're better than those people, that those people are evil, bad, the problem. It reminds us that we can be self-righteous in our hatred and our contempt. It tells us that we have the choice of fighting for our country at the expense of our fellow countrymen. Contempt, seems to me, is the least American of all values. The least American of all hopes and dreams. We are a country founded on the principle that if we try, if we come together, if we believe in something bigger than ourselves, we can do anything. Contempt tells us the opposite. If we destroy, if we have snark, if we have disdain, we can satisfy ourselves. So the virus is there, and we have a choice. And as we stand here in this place where people lost their lives, I think it's a sobering choice. The work that we are embarking on here with Disagree Better and with all the work that's being done in Oklahoma in its schools, we hope someday, is trying to say we are making a choice for dignity. We are not sacrificing our principles. Moral choices are serious. They have implications. Not everybody is right. History tells us that we can make mistakes as a people, and those mistakes have consequences. So we are not suggesting that people on the right or people on the left mute their moral principles, squash their convictions, not abandon their ideals. Quite the contrary. As Judge Griffith said, we are suggesting in this day and age that we carry our deepest and most passionate moral convictions with dignity for those we disagree with. It is not an either-or. You do not have to believe in your party or your political position or the issue at the expense of the dignity of the person you disagree with. That's a choice that's being fed to us by conflict entrepreneurs who are telling us every day, as often as we are willing to tune in, that you should hate in order to advance your view of the country. Now, we're not labeling here, but we are suggesting that those conflict entrepreneurs have their wages, and we, those of us who want to disagree better, who want to build a more healthy and hopeful America, we also have our dividends. Our dividends remind us that there is no good outcome from contempt in politics. Contempt in politics makes it impossible to solve problems. It doesn't work. There is no good outcome from contempt in our relationships. Contempt divides us, it wounds our marriages, it hurts our families, it damages our schools, it wounds even our own inner lives. Those of us who have seen contempt out of control are standing in a place where the dividends of that are clear. I need not add to them. Violence is the natural outcome from contempt taken to an extreme. The hope here today is that there is a new version of our country that is being born. Governors, in many cases, are leading it, but so are average citizens who are starving for a change, who are starving for an end. I call them the starving majority. Most of us in this room do not want to go home tonight and tune in and be angry and frustrated and sleepless and hating our brothers and sisters and cousins and uncles and aunts who are of a different party. I'm almost done. I got it. I know I get going, so I got to slow down. We don't want that. So we come, my colleague Tammy Pfeiffer and I, we've got this dignity index, and we bring it to you in the spirit of awakening us to the best in us. The great gift of the Dignity Index, I'll just hold it up, we've got them for you here, is that it allows us to see ways in which we disagree that are destructive and ways in which we can disagree that are productive. And it doesn't just allow us to see that Governor Stitt sometimes doesn't score that well. It allows us to see that Tim Shriver doesn't score that well. That I need to raise my game. We call it the mirror effect. If each of us raises our game, we change the course of the country. And if we do it together in gatherings like this, we change the course of history. I thank you for including me. I look forward to sharing with you during the course of this extraordinary afternoon the insights I've learned mostly from the athletes of Special Olympics. Their oath is, let me win, but if I cannot win, let me be brave in the attempt. I wish every politician would start their campaign with that oath. I wish every one of us who serves in legislatures or in school boards or on the bench would share that oath. Let my side prevail. But if it doesn't prevail, let me be brave. Let me treat others with dignity. Let me be a great American. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim. That's a great start. So as I invite the next panel to come up, we're going to hear from a group. It's going to be our convener, Governor Stitt, and Representative Shriver. There we go. And Chief Justice Taylor is going to come in. As they come up to take their seats, I want you to pick up your sheet, okay? Pick up your sheet. And the first question is, how does the problem of polarization affect you? How does it affect your family? How does it affect your neighborhood? How does it affect your church? How does it affect you? Give some thought to that, maybe jot a note or two down. But now we're going to hear from a panel that's going to be talking about how you can actually get things done. Policy objectives that can be accomplished despite the divides. And so we're fortunate to have Governor Kevin Stitt, who's our convener at today. He's joined by Representative Susan Shriver from District 70, which is the Tulsa area. See, I've learned that since I'm here. And I'm especially grateful to welcome a fellow jurist who will be moderating their discussion, the former Chief Justice of the Oklahoma Supreme Court, the Honorable Stephen Taylor. Mr. Chief Justice, time is yours.
Thank you, Judge. This first panel, you're going to be hearing from a Republican, Governor Kevin Stitt, and a Democrat, Representative Suzanne Shriver. And they're going to be discussing and talking about how they have learned through their interactions at the state capitol to make good things happen, even though they may disagree from time to time on issues that are important to them. And so this is an opportunity for us to learn in a constructive and productive way from their experience. And we come together today because it has become obvious to everyone that we in the United States have in many ways forgotten how to disagree with one another. We've forgotten how to do that. And today the theme is, let's learn better how to disagree, because disagreement is good. It brings about good things and good ideas. So these two public servants during the past legislative session found that they could make some big differences and make good things happen, even though we have a Republican governor and a Democrat state representative. And so I want to talk to them today and ask them about first of all, their experiences this past legislative session on a couple of issues that they worked together on and how they made good things happen, a Republican and a Democrat. Start off with let the governor go first.
Well, first off, thanks everybody for getting here and coming and being part of this. We think this is so important for us to model, not only for Oklahomans, but also for the country. And so you can see why I'm just a huge fan of Tim Shriver. Didn't he do an amazing job of kind of kicking this off? I mean, doesn't he look a lot like his uncle JFK too? Weren't y'all thinking that? But in the National Governors Association, which is our bipartisan group of governors, believe it or not, we actually agree more than we disagree. Because governors, I think, have a unique approach that we're having to make sure that we've got safe schools, safe communities, good education, the good economy, roads and bridges. And so as chief executives of our state, we have to make decisions for our communities and have a reliable, affordable electricity grid and all that. And we can have some policy disagreements. But I always tell Oklahomans, let's let Washington, D.C. play politics. We're all Oklahomans. Let's make our state top 10. And that's what I love about the representative here. And so I just thought it'd be great for us to model kind of how we can talk about things. And we may have a difference of opinion between each other, but we don't have to do it hatefully, and we can argue. And I think that's where, in business, that's where the best ideas come from. It's when we're coming up with the best solution. And so I'm always encouraging people, tell me why I should think differently about this situation. I want to learn from you. And so we've got a couple bills we worked on. I'll flip it over to you, Representative, and talk about those bills that we worked together on.
Happy to. Well, I want to thank the museum for having us and hosting this important conversation. In a super majority state, it's really important that we do stay curious and listen, not just on my side, but on the other side as well, because a lot of times we make these ideals of what this person is and what that person is, and they're labeled, and we don't stay curious, and so we don't do that listening that we need to do. And sometimes when we have an imbalance in the state and the legislature, it becomes even harder to hear those things and let the voices come through. So these conversations are so important. And I want to start out with a story about the day after we finished our budget. The governor came to Tulsa and signed the levy bill. We thought nothing was going to happen. There's a bunch of my fellow legislators here. We did not think anything was going to come out of that legislature. We were waiting. There was budget summits. There was disagreements. We didn't know when we were going to get something done. But we got it together. We worked together, and the budget was voted on. And the very next day, the governor came to Tulsa, and every legislator from the area, our county commissioners, our local city council, mayor, everyone was included to take care of this very important thing that was a long-term, high-dollar investment for the state. It mattered a lot because it was Tulsa's people, but it mattered a ton because it was an investment in showing that we could work together, and it was one of my best days that I've had in the legislature. I was proud to have supported that budget. I was proud to be there, and that the governor, our governor, made that a priority to come and take care of public health, people, safety, the businesses in that area, and knew that we needed to get that done and make a big show of it and bring us all together. And that was just such a great day to remember that it takes all of us working together to take care of Oklahomans.
There was another important issue concerning public health that the governor mentioned. As a governor, he's interested in schools and roads and public health. And you and the governor worked together on a medical issue having to do with public health and taking care of consumers.
Yes.
Talk about that.
So we had a bill that was about medical price transparency. And I will say that when I was thinking about that bill, it has to do with making sure that consumers know what their medical procedures are going to cost. And if they don't know, then they shouldn't be saddled with debt for it. And over the interim, I saw my Senate author, who's in the audience, Senator Daniels, and I said to her, she said, I saw you're running an interim study on this medical debt issue and price transparency. And I said, yes. And she said, I'd be interested in talking to you about that. And I said, I'd love to talk to you too, but I wasn't sure since I'm a Democrat. And she said, is it a good bill? And I said, yes. And she walked with me the whole way through that bill. And the governor has, the reason we're able to come together on that bill is because it has to do with the public knowing what something costs. It's a very free enterprise, free market piece. So he was able to get right on board with it. And I think about maybe more about people being saddled with debt, but we come together around that. I'll let him speak
Governor,
to his
talk about
thoughts on it.
how you got involved with this and what you did.
Yeah, I think you know what she said there on the bill. For us, it's pretty common sense. Coming from the business world, we have to have pricing transparency. I think that's a free market principle. If you have a gallon of milk at this grocery store and a gallon of milk at this grocery store, that's got to be competitive. They've got to be market transactions, right? But we see in the healthcare profession a lot of times that you'll see an MRI cost here would be $500 and it's going to be $2,500 over here. So we need more transparency. We all understand that the cost of healthcare is going through the roof. So anything that we can bring more transparency, more free markets, holding people accountable and letting the consumer or letting the person choosing those services to understand the pricing, to me just makes total common sense. And yes, nobody wants people to be saddled with the medical debt, with insurance costs. It'll drive up costs to the businesses. So that was great policy, and I was very happy to get on board with it. I thank my colleagues that are out here for getting it to my desk.
I think an important point, and I know you and Senator Daniels are lawyers, and I want to brag on you for that. And I think an important
No one ever does that.
well, I will. An important point is, as you said, Senator Daniels said, is it a good bill? That's what brings people together, a good bill.
And we have that experience frequently, and when we don't agree, the important thing is to really sit down and get out of your assumptions that you may be seeing and assuming about someone that has a D or an R label. Be curious, find out where they are coming from. What is their core reason for not liking what you have, and not just thinking they don't want to work with me, but really generating those conversations. And when you're shaming them or shouting, no good bill ever came out of people insulting people in the newspaper or in social media, right? We have to have these conversations that are either one-on-one or through a staff member, however it comes about, but really learning about what is at the core of what that person's motivation for our dispute is, and always be talking about policy and never about a person, always engaging in policy.
Now let's take a look and change the subject just a little bit. We talked about agreement. Issues upon which the two of you might disagree. Can you talk about that? Issues that you might disagree upon and how you handle that. Governor, you want to?
I think that's what the audience has been waiting to watch. So
Yeah. So talk about how you know.
Let me get out my brass knuckles.
yeah. Well, I think, did you want to take the first
Why don't
shot
you-
at that?
Yeah. Tell us what you and the governor disagree on and how you handle that.
Sure. So we had a bill come forward on immigration this year. That was probably the bill that I felt the most distressed about in my first 2 years. It was a very blunt instrument. It came together in a very short amount of time. I think that's a federal issue, and I had concerns that it was going to be harmful to our communities and hard on our public safety communities as well in implementing that. I think that bill would have benefited from more conversation, but I think we can keep talking about and not say it's done and just walk away. We have to continue. I'm not going to lay my concerns aside. I think the governor has his own concerns about that instrument and trying to figure it out, but at the time it was something that I could not support given its kind of rudimentary nature. It was very all people, everything, all the time, without really thinking about these people that are living and working in our communities, taxpayers, and a part of our communities now.
Yeah, and that for you that don't know, most of you probably know what she's talking about, but that was a bill that was trying to address illegal immigration into our state. And you know, as governor, I don't get to draft the bills. They come to my desk the way they are, and I have to make decisions on them. But I like to separate that bill into two parts. One is we have to have border security. I think even when I'm in the rooms with my fellow Democrat governors, they understand that illegal immigration, some of the things that are happening, the taxation on our housing, on our medical system, it is really hurting a lot of the communities. And so I hear we have to have a strong border. But there's also the immigration issue. We want people coming into our country legally. We want to make a way. If you're chasing the American dream and you're paying taxes, you want to be part of the community, we want that. And so I set up a commission to study and say, how can the state issue workforce visas? I believe that the states are the best spot to be able to issue that. What better place than if an employer is trying to match an employee relationship, then whether it's in construction or agriculture or manufacturing, that they come to the governors for those workforce needs and those workforce visas. So we need to solve that. I understand it's a complicated issue, but I also remind people this bill did not make it illegal to be in Oklahoma, to cross the border illegally. So it was giving some of our law enforcement the right to enforce federal law that, quite frankly, is not being enforced at the southern border.
Would it be correct, would you both agree that you both understand each other's concerns?
Absolutely. I think what I've learned from this conversation and what we want to communicate is being curious and understanding, kind of letting go of the end of the conversation. Not me trying to convince the governor that's a bad bill, it's horrible, we can't do that. What we want to do is learn about how we can improve it together. No good bill, the best bills are going to have that back and forth. And so I have learned that there is real public safety concerns, and we saw some of those on the front stage right after that bill, not very long. We have to figure that out. We also, I hope, need to figure out how we give our local public safety authorities what they need to take care of and what the real issue is. Should we be sending them down to the border? Should we be asking them to do things in their communities that they feel creates fear and mistrust? How can we be more specific and targeted at the issue? But I have learned that there is a real public safety issue from the governor in this conversation.
And I mean, and what I learned, and we talked even before I signed the bill. You came to me, it was a group of people from Tulsa, the Hispanic community. I tell the Hispanic community, we have a great Hispanic community in Oklahoma, and so I was trying to alleviate those fears. I know it's so difficult when people have been here for 40 years or they were brought here as a child. That is such a tough issue, and it's really impractical to send people back. So that's why the immigration portion is so important. Ronald Reagan, when he was president, had a path to citizenship, but he had to have a strong border first. So we're talking past each other on a federal level. These are federal issues. We're trying to do the best we can as a state to take care of our economy, to make sure people know that we want you here paying taxes, working hard, chasing the American dream. But we also want to support the policies because depending on the estimates that you believe, 11 to 16 million people that have come illegally into the country, and it's from all over the world on the terrorist watch list. There is definitely a problem at the southern border, and it's already illegal to cross anywhere except these ports of entry. And so we were trying to signal and say, hey, we're going to make sure that we're supporting that. We want to make sure that we have a strong border.
Bottom line, can you both agree that
We have a lot of work to do together on this.
well, that's one way to put it. That you both agree that each of you expressing disagreement will end up making whatever you end up doing stronger.
Absolutely.
100%.
Okay, that's the whole key. Moving on to another subject, and it's been mentioned, Mr. Shriver mentioned it, social media. Talk about how social media has impacted the way you do your work, how you deal with the disagreements that crop up in social media. Talk about how it impacts your work. Governor, you want to go first with that?
Yeah, and I also I want to hit on education too, because that was an area that we had talked about. I think that's really, really important because the thing that I think people that we all agree on is that we want, and Suzanne and I agree, we want the best education for our kids in our communities. She is a mother of 4. I'm a father of 6. And there's nothing more important than to Oklahomans to make sure that next generation has the opportunities that we do. And so this past year, and I'm anxious to hear her point on this, first off, I put more money in public education in my first 5 years as governor. Most people maybe don't realize this than they did for 25 years before I got here. So we have to take care of our public education system. But the other thing that we've done in Oklahoma is we have made sure that every family now has a refundable tax credit to go to a school of their choice. And so I remind people all the time, rich people already have school choice. They can put their kids in any school that they want. If their kid is in a bad situation with maybe they're getting into drugs or they're in a failing school district with low ACT scores or dropouts, they're going to do whatever they can to move their kids. Well, we passed, and it was a big battle, it was a big fight, but we have up to $7,500 to go to a school of their choice now. And so I think about that mom that is in a situation that she's in a bad school district and she wants an opportunity for her kid as well. And so I think that creates competition. It's a free market principle, and I'm watching what's happening in other states. And I know that's something that we've kind of have a different approach on, and I would love to hear her side on that one.
Happy to. The most important thing about the conversation is that we do both agree that we want the best for our kids. And when we think about that, we have to think about our public education system, because that is meeting the needs of 80-90% of our kids. So we want to make sure that we are getting those kids what they need. And we have passed this tax credit. We're not probably going to put that back in the can. I think that's part of disagreeing better, is moving on to what can we do to make sure that that tax credit is serving its intended purpose. Those are a dollar, just like a public school dollar that has a whole bunch of accountability around it. We want to make sure that those dollars are serving the kids that we think about and not replacing a dollar for someone who can already afford a private school. So how are we thinking about how we're best delivering those dollars to the least among us? I know the governor comes from that place where someone is not able to already make that decision and has disposable income and just says, forget this, I can't do this, I'm going to go to a different school, and I think a private school is the choice for me and my family. If that is our objective, we want to make sure that we're using our tax dollars to achieve that. And I think we go forward, we can continue to have that conversation, very importantly, and also making sure that our 90%, 80%, whatever it is, get what they need as well. And that is a charge that we have to all take very seriously, because public school and our school systems are the starting ground for this democracy, who's going to be here, who's going to live in Oklahoma, who our workforce is. So we want to get that right, and it bears continuing to work on it really, really hard.
I have been given a wind-up signal from the boss in the back. Governor, any quick close?
Let's talk about social media real quick. I think we got a couple minutes, and then.
Well, you can overrule the person who just gave me the person who gave me the wind up. You can overrule.
Let's talk about that, because that's something we're all passionate about, is protecting our young people. And there's executive orders I'm looking at on cell phones in schools. Some other states. I just got back from a convention with some of my colleagues that are looking at how can we give schools some cover as they're taking cell phones to make sure. I mean, the mental health issues, the suicide, the things that are harming our young people, and we need our education system to be focused on teaching our kids and all the pressures. There's so many pressures right now that we want to help however we can. So we've been doing some things in the social media space, and I would be interested to see kind of your point on that as well, Representative.
I agree with you. As a mother of 4, I think 20 years from now, there's going to be a warning on a cell phone like we have on a pack of cigarettes. And we need to figure out what the right way to do that is and protect privacy. I think in the social media realm, we all know social media is part of what leads us to need these conversations. It's a toxic environment. It builds, you're in a text string right now. You're in a group chat. You're on a Facebook page. You're on Instagram. You're somewhere where there is things being said about probably someone in this room, and everybody's repeating that and saying it over and over again. And that is lazy. When we accept that and not go and knock on the governor's door or knock on our person across the aisle's door and say, who are you? Are you a mom? Are you a dad? Are you a fellow lover of dogs? What is it that we connect on, and how can we move forward together and let that R or D label go to the side? I always say, if I could, I would have an O behind my name, because that is what I am here for, Oklahomans. That is what we're all here for. And if we can just internalize that principle of starting there, that we actually really truly internalize that and believe that the governor is coming to this with serving our students, our families, our businesses with the most earnest interest, and accept that and be curious about the decisions he makes in service to those, and not let social media drive this image of what an R or a D is, I think is so important. And I encourage all of us to figure out how to stay out of those conversations and share positivity. I think when we do that, I get so much more positive feedback when we are positive. I learned about Disagree Better from the governor and Tim Shriver on social media.
Social media probably is why we need to work on learning how to disagree, because I think social media maybe have caused us to forget how to disagree. Want to close this with the book of Isaiah teaches us good people to repair the breach. And today, maybe that can be a message that we can all take home with us, that we work in our community, as the book of Isaiah taught, to repair the to repair the breach. And that's a message that we can all take home today. Thank you, Governor, and thank you, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Justice. Thank you, Governor. Thank you, Representative Shriver. Social scientists tell us that what's happening today in terms of our disagreements in America is different than it's ever been. I mean, I grew up in the 60s or 70s. There was a lot of disagreement then. But what they're telling us now is the nature of the disagreement is something social scientists call affective polarization. Here's what it means. You hate the other side. It's not just that you think they have bad policy ideas, you think they are bad people. And the numbers are quite overwhelming. Over 70% of Democrats think that Republicans are immoral. Similar number for Democrats, Republicans. I think what we just saw demonstrated before us here today is two people who disagree about things but have respect for one another and have dignity for one another, and thank you for doing that. So if you'll look at your sheets, what were the most important insights you heard about how to work effectively across political differences from the governor and Representative Shriver? Give that some thoughts as I get ready to introduce our next panel. Now, talking about disagreeing better on Capitol Hill, as difficult as that is, our next panel is going to talk about how to disagree better in university settings. We're going from the pan to the fire on this one right now. Fortunately, we're going to be led in this discussion. Our moderator is Secretary Nellie Sanders, the Secretary of Education for Oklahoma, and she'll moderate the discussion amongst Dr. Matra Jones, the president of Oklahoma City Community College, Dr. Thomas Newsom, the president of Southeastern Oklahoma State University, and Dr. Heath Thomas, the president of Oklahoma Baptist University. Madam Secretary.
Thank you so much, and thank you all so much for joining us. This is a really important conversation. I know it's one that's an important topic to a lot in education, but also in our communities. So appreciate you all being here. Institutions of higher education have long been regarded as being the location where beliefs can be challenged. And I know you all know you've had lots of experience in this, but it can also be a lot of open forums for discussion. There are also some who say that voices are suppressed. Some say that conservative voices are often suppressed. How do you all work to ensure that your campuses are an open forum for discussion? And what are some examples of what you've seen that has worked well?
Thank you so much, Madam Secretary. I would love to kick us off. Certainly I want to thank the governor and this platform today to have a much needed conversation. At Oklahoma City Community College, we have a wide variety of students, really from every age, different backgrounds. They come to us, various plights in life, careers, and really it's our goal to help them really on their journey in terms of take a deeper dive into exploration. We don't shy away from the difficult conversations, and we create a healthy, nurturing environment, a safe environment, and then we allow that environment to thrive. So for instance, when people come to us and they enter our doors, they're coming with their primary socializations. So all of that means, what they've learned with their families, their respective organizations, everything that they've learned from their communities and, places of worship. It's our job, really, we believe, to facilitate those secondary socializations. So that's going to be things that they learn from their peers, from their faculty, professors, and just really their experiences. And so we welcome, really an open dialogue, and we create healthy platforms that allow not only students but our faculty to engage in various discussions and in ways that they can strengthen as they are on their journey. We also believe that we don't have to shy away from the difficult conversations, that our differences are value added. And so that's really the approach in the community college setting with the thousands of students we serve and faculty and staff as well that we take at OCCC.
Well, thank you, Governor, for this opportunity, and thanks to the museum for hosting us. This is an incredible opportunity to talk about something that we all live and breathe. It's just disagreement on a college campus. I represent a private university. Private universities are founded to provide public good in the public square. That's what we do on our best days. And one of the things that we know is a university is designed to be a place for the free exchange of ideas. They're designed to educate, not indoctrinate. And that's what we're supposed to do. And we strive towards that ideal day in and day out. Now, listen, that is a messy experience because of all of the elements that Matra has rightly identified. You're dealing with people coming from different backgrounds, different places of origin, different experiences, different faith traditions. And so a university campus is kind of a melting pot where that combustible reality oftentimes overflows into things that we've seen on the news all across this campus. I think the more that we prioritize education rather than indoctrination, when we focus on going to the jugular of an idea rather than going for the jugular of a person, that's when we can create light rather than heat. And that's not an easy experience, but that's the promise of higher education, that we shape and form our students so that they begin to see the big picture. We're all working together for the common good. And that's true whether you're going to be an engineer or a doctor or work in the government or work in the healthcare industry. We're all pulling together to provide a community in which we can eat, live, work, and play, and do so with basic freedom. And that's what we're striving for. It's not an easy thing to do, but that's what we're wanting.
You said it all. So again, thank you, Governor, for putting this together. And Dr. Thomas and I were sitting up at the front of the room when we got up. It's a big room. It's exciting to know that there's this many people that want to have this conversation. So I think at Southeastern, we're a public regional university, and we have adopted part of our culture, part of our strategic plan there is to become what we're calling a student-ready university. Universities historically have always said, is the student ready to be a university student? We're gonna do placement testing, and we're gonna look at your transcript, and we're gonna look at your test scores, and we're gonna decide whether you're ready to be a university student or not. And we've tried to flip the script and say, are we a university that's ready for our students? And it's because our students, like has been said, come from so many different places, so many different backgrounds, so many different frames of reference, so many different places of experience that is just different. And if we don't acknowledge that, if we don't understand that, if we don't hear that, then we're going to miss out. And our mission at Southeastern Oklahoma State University is one that's simple. It is to provide an environment where students can reach their most potential. And I add on to that, and then be successful in life. And if we are going to provide an environment where students can reach their highest potential, then it goes back to what Mr. Shriver was saying about contempt. We have to set up an environment that is free of contempt, where everybody understands that everybody comes from a different perspective and a different place, and give them avenues to then have those kind of discussions with an understanding that our rules are those discussions are going to happen without contempt, without disruption, without invading the space of someone else that is trying to get an education and to better themselves and to better their life on our campus.
Thank you for that, all of you. Those were great responses. Dr. Thomas, you actually brought up a great topic, which is the headlines. We have all been watching the headlines around the Israeli conflict and Hamas, and we've been also talking about a lot of the protests that are happening. Our country is really grappling between the conversation and the protesting. How do you all ensure that you protect the freedom of speech, but at the same time that you're keeping the safety of the Jewish students at a really, really this balancing act between they also have a voice in this as well, but many times they don't get to be heard in the same way either. So how do you guys balance the two between their physical safety and also their safety, and then the right of those with the freedom of speech?
Well, thank you for the question, and I'll say my perspective on what we do at OBU, but I'm really interested to hear what Matra and Thomas have to say. So number one, we are a private Christian university, so we do believe in the dignity of every single individual. What we know about this next generation, it's an unbelievable generation. A lot of people have written this generation off, and the generations that are coming after as the snowflake generation or whatever. We don't buy into that. This is a generation that wants to make a difference. And a lot of what we're seeing across the nation, I think in its best sense, is passion to make a difference in our world. And we all love that. I think where we want to see that passion oriented differently is from our Christian perspective on a higher education standpoint, the dignity of every single human being. Everyone has voice, agency, and power. We want to see that productively, constructively exercised in a way that provides for the common good. Absolutely. I think the danger is where I exercise my voice, agency, and power at the expense of someone else. That's dangerous. And so we want to respect the dignity of each and every one individual, but always protect the dignity and the voice, agency, and power of someone else. And that's, again, not easy, but we've got to do it, and we've got to fight for that.
Well, and I think part of that is understanding that, and I agree with Dr. Thomas, this generation is of college students, those at Southeastern specifically, are a generation that's looking for purpose. They're a generation that understands that there has to be a why in life, and that they are a generation of purpose. And that gives me a lot of hope. That gives me a lot of pride in our future, because they are looking for purpose. And you have to set up an environment, you have to set up initiatives where you can help them find their purpose. We do a lot of that training on our campus. One of our big philosophies and culture in our John Massey School of Business is this idea that capitalism is fantastic. Capitalism has changed the world. It's one of the greatest things ever. But there's ideas of conscious capitalism, and the idea that everyone matters, and the idea that you can practice that in a way that cares for people, that cares for society, and that gives people a purpose. And I think when you, again, set those kind of boundaries, then it allows students to think in a way that is more collegial, it's more congenial, and it allows them to have those conversations with each other when they don't necessarily agree. Someone told me the other day, I thought it was great, I was having a conversation about something and along these lines, and they said, you know, the good Lord gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. And that he did that for a reason, and that's because there's a lot of times that we need to use the 2 ears and not use the 1 mouth.
At Oklahoma City Community College, you know, we're the state's 4th largest institution of higher education, so we serve over 18,000 students on the credit-seeking side, and another 5,000 on the non-credit-seeking side. We are a commuter campus, and so we don't have necessarily residential life. That said, our mission is pretty simple. I mean, it's student success and community enrichment. So we often facilitate conversations from different community organizations on campus and lend our campus to really be a hub, if you will, of great conversations, dialogue around these different ideologies and philosophies. And again, we invite those conversations in a constructive, healthy manner. We encourage that, and we make sure that our campus community, you know, our faculty, staff, students, even those who are engaging with us externally, we we ensure that they understand, here are kind of some parameters to work with. We want to be respectful, and we want to make sure that people feel heard and seen. And so we facilitate that by, again, not shying away from, these current events and things that we would prefer to not have to necessarily dive into, but we encourage that. And so student safety, safety in terms of freedom of thought, expression, those are really interwoven into our campus community in every aspect. We make sure that people understand, if you're going to come and participate, kind of hear the parameters around that, let's make sure that it's healthy, because we want people to be heard and understood. And we also believe that we don't want people to have necessarily bad experiences. So it's make sure that you come, make sure that you're open and honest, but that you're respectful. And we don't have to shy away or shun anyone for wanting to come and express themselves, but let's make sure that we're doing it in a productive manner, and again, respecting and valuing differences. One of the things that I've been able to do, and I'm very proud of it, is we really press the envelope on ensuring that our campus community has different exposures and experiences. And so we don't stay in our little safe haven in South Oklahoma City. We're doing things statewide, regionally, nationally, and internationally, because I believe that those interactions break down barriers and help drive understanding. And that's really what it takes. We live in a global society, and we're preparing global citizens to be able to go and thrive in any career path that they choose. And so in doing so, it's not being afraid to explore out, beyond our walls, but making sure that we invite others in, but that we have different experiences so that we can, certainly value one another.
Thank you all so much for those questions or answers. Social media is one we hear a lot about. So we have a lot of narrative around social media. I'm really intrigued about the role of social media and how this plays into some of the additional dynamics you will have to manage on your campuses. And then also, is this something that's a discourse that you're constantly managing, that's a big presence, and is this something you anticipate getting worse?
Sad to say, I think I anticipate it getting worse. And my biggest concern is that, again, we live in a society that has become instant gratification. And that sort of culture limits people's ability to stop and think and listen and process and then make good decisions, because we try to make them based on a clip that we saw that was however long they are, and then they disappear and they go away forever. But I think the biggest thing is that we have seen that, especially during the pandemic and the rise of social media and the rise of people being more tied to technology, that people are losing the ability to have relationships. And relationships are probably, in my mind, the core of who we are as human beings. Shelby Wilson from Ponca City was inducted into the Oklahoma Sports Hall of Fame last Monday night, and he told a story about how he had a lot of great things in life, and one of them was an Olympic medal that he won in 1960 as a wrestler. And he said he realizes at 86 years old that if the problem is that he valued those things as important, and that someday they will belong to somebody else. And the things that we should be valuing as a society and as people and as human beings are things that can't belong to somebody else. And that's who we are as people. That's our ethics. That's our faith. That's what we believe in. That's how we treat other people. And that's the relationships that we have. And I think social media has really taken away from specifically generations of young people the ability for them not only to have relationships, but to understand the importance of relationships.
Yeah, and I think from my perspective, and when we think about social media at the university, this next generation, 2007 was like the printing press, the revolution of the printing press. That's when we had the iPhone and Facebook, and it changed the world. And I think, first of all, my generation and everybody who's above my generation, we need to recognize the significance of that. The world is not the same. And we might as well just own up to that. The generation behind us, those that we're equipping day in and day out, they already know this. What we've got to do is come alongside and help understand that social media is a tool. Like any tool, it can be used for purpose or it can be used to destroy. And so, number one, I think as a tool, social media has got to be used as an instrument to initiate conversation, not to close the conversation. And so we've got to prioritize truth and then the complexity of what it means to be a human being. You and I cannot be captured in our complexity as God made us to be in a character, a tweet, or a TikTok video or something like that. You can't boil us down to that. And so somehow we've got to see the complexity of human beings, allow these tools to actually be tools to initiate deeper conversation and relationship, prioritize those relationships, and then get into a deep conversation with someone.
I would add, and of course echoing my colleagues' sentiments, it appears that we're moving far away from being relational, and I hear it from employers, from industry partners, as they come to campus recruiting students. They say it would really be nice if I would have students that looked me in the eye, that made eye contact, that extended their hand to shake my hand, who greeted me as Mr. Jones, not Hey Joe. And so it's those types of things that I believe that social media certainly is a tool, but I think we have to ensure the responsible use of social media. And I certainly think about these things as a parent, as a mother with young children, and monitoring their activity and kind of what they're doing. And there's so many influences that are there, and I certainly look at it with the lens of a college president and ensuring that our faculty and students, they have resources they need, and that we're doing our part to provide training and of course being responsible. But I take it back to just being relational and making sure that we are doing our parts to combat kind of some of the things that do occur with social media, so that the generations that are coming behind us don't lose the ability to connect, to be able to have meaningful conversations and dialogue, and to even know how to greet and approach people. It's going to serve them very well in their lives. And so again, it's a great tool, but we just have to certainly be responsible and think about how we're promoting and using that.
Thank you all so much. I can speak, I'm sure, for everyone in this room. We're very, very blessed to have your leadership in our state, especially for our youth and the generations you're going to be serving. So thank you all so much. And at this point, we can round of applause for everyone. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to give a special thanks to the governor, who was his idea to have a panel of leaders of education, which is a good reminder to us that our schools have got to be the place where we learn to disagree better. If it doesn't happen there, it's not going to happen. Thank you very much. As our next panel comes up, get your sheet of paper out. And how about this question? From the panel that you just heard, what did you hear in this discussion that's relevant to you in your interactions with others? Not necessarily in the school place, but generally. As you disagree with folks, what did you learn from our educators about how to best to go about that? Dr. Newsom, I just have to think of something. You reminded us that the Lord gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, and that there's some power in that. To quote Will Rogers, one of my favorite quotes, Will Rogers said, "Never miss a good opportunity to shut up." Right? And that's an important part of this, where as we learn to listen to one another. And I was reminded by hearing these university presidents. I recently heard the president of Biola University say something very similar to what you just heard here today. And he said, with tongue a little bit in cheek, but not totally, he said, "I'm anxious for my students at Biola University to become activists. Yeah, I want them to be activists. But before that, I'd like them to be able to sit down at a table and learn how to listen to other people," which thank you for teaching us that and modeling that. So we now have a different panel covering a different specter of public life in Oklahoma. And we're going to have David McAllister Wilson, the president of Wesley Theological Seminary, moderated a discussion between Mike Beckham, who's the CEO of Simple Modern, a leading international drinkware and consumer goods company, and Renzi Stone, the CEO of Saxum, an integrated marketing and communications agency, to talk about how leadership values and faith traditions teach us and help us to disagree better. So, Dr. McAllister Wilson.
The question in everybody's mind is, what's that guy doing up there? Well, the idea for these series of events led by America's governors in sacred spaces began in my office at the seminary and then went to the Washington National Cathedral. Because we believe faith can play a role to help Americans disagree better. I've had the privilege to teach leadership in our Doctor of Ministry program to military chaplains. I've had over 200 of them over the years, from Roman Catholic, Jewish, Latter-day Saint, Muslim, Buddhist, Unitarians, and the various types of Protestants. These chaplains are called to serve in crisis moments amidst people of all faiths and no faith. It is a reminder, because their role is protected constitutionally, it is a reminder that the Founding Fathers intentionally established a nation whose government was neutral to religion, but which supported the religious freedom of all its citizens, because they knew that faith has profound power to motivate good citizenship, but it also has the power to divide. And so I'm appreciative of our two panelists who will help us think about this as men of faith. And so I want to just ask them, how does your faith shape the way you interact with people in your life, in your business, particularly with those with whom you disagree?
I'll go first. You know, I had, first of all, Governor and Mrs. Stitt, thank you for having us at the museum. Tim, thank you for being here, the other panelists. So I had the fortune of playing basketball at the University of Oklahoma, and it was just a great experience. I played for this guy, Kevin Stitt, who's an incredible coach, very fiery. And when I was a senior, we had a moment one day where we were in a really intense practice, and he started yelling at me about something, and I felt very strongly that he was wrong. And I've been around this guy now for 4 years. I jumped right back at him. And I mean, I think he just caught me on the wrong day, but I was always very respectful of the coach-player relationship. I gave it back to him with everything I had. And I mean, everything kind of stopped. And I thought, that may have been a mistake. And he looked at me and he said, hold on. He goes, you saying that to me tells me one thing. It tells me there's a commitment that you've made to this team. And where there is passion and emotion and caring, that's not a bad thing, even if we disagree about something. And so I was thinking about Matthew 7:20 as I was coming up here. Thus you will know them by their deeds. Thus you will know them by their deeds. So when I think about being at work and being a person of faith, I think about judgment. And I think about how imperfect I am, and I think about the mistakes I make on a daily basis, and I think about how the judgment I want from somebody else is how they observe me. What are the things that I do? How do I conduct myself? How do I behave? And then I think about Acts 19:2, where it says, when you received the Holy Spirit, and what did the disciples say? We did not know there was a Holy Spirit. Not everybody knows. And so less judgment, the ability to have passion, recognize that passion in somebody else is a commitment. There's something they believe in and they want to defend, is how I deal with that.
Yeah, thank you.
I do not have any college basketball stories to share. And it's always embarrassing when I'm sitting next to Renzi. I did, however, have my life pretty radically changed when I was in college. That's when I came to faith. And simply put, it's really transformed everything I think about me. And the place that I would start is actually that I'm a Christian, and the Christian faith actually starts with the belief that you're not a good person. And the reason why I think that's really relevant to what we're talking about is that often when we're very disagreeable in the way that we disagree with others, it's because we think very highly of ourselves and our position. And we think we're a little bit better than. And so I think the starting point for me is that coming to the conclusion that you're not that great of a person, that you're not always right, that you don't possess rightness within yourself is actually a great starting point. I mean, really the word is humility. Couldn't our world use more humility? Couldn't I use more humility, you know? So I think that's the start, is that it's easy for me in moments sometimes to want to play the us versus them game, you know, whether it's in business or other areas of my life, in my heart. And I always have to remind myself that what I believe is that I don't have it all together, and that I have much that, you know, I'm coming from a place of humility, and that helps. I think another thing that's really come from my faith being a central role in my life that really plays into being a business leader in particular is that I have a much higher view of the responsibility and social contract that comes with leading a company. That, you know, capitalism's been great for the world. It's been great for the world, but it has not been perfect. And there have certainly been plenty of examples where capitalism has been used and kind of abused by people. And I think my faith really informs the way that I pursue capitalism in a way where it's like I have a high responsibility to the community. There's a high amount of both opportunity and responsibility to make an impact, to be generous, to use the resources, the influence that our company has at this point to make a positive impact. And I've really kind of welcomed that. So at a really base level, it's transformed my motivations, and I think it's transformed the way that I define success for me personally.
Thank you. Usually I'm the tallest on a panel, inside, so I am humbled to be in your presence. I want to take us to the narthex. How many people in here know when I say the word narthex, what that means? Okay, so there's rules of behavior in the narthex. We know how to have civil discourse in the narthex. Stay away from anything private, stay away from anything political. The challenge, I think, is that means as people of faith often we think we can't discuss anything important in the narthex or anywhere else. How do you see us disagreeing better when we disagree? How does our faith inform that, and how can it be taken beyond the narthex into the world without it being thought of as crusading?
Tell me. We had the opportunity to see some of these questions ahead of time, and this one is I think among the most difficult for us to answer. I think about acceptance versus accommodation. So I am 6'9", and when you ask me about my identity, I identify more than anything with being really tall. Yeah. Why? Because I'm reminded of it on a daily basis. So in the narthex, in the lobby of my business, in my business, at the Capitol, among friends, curiosity, non-judgment behavior is about accepting people where they are, trying to understand where they come from. I think where we really get backwards is the accommodation part. And if everybody accommodated my height, we would have to rewrite most of our laws, because that door right there is 6'8". Why do I know that? That's the standard door height. And I found that out about the time I was 6'8.5". And so I don't have the answer to how to dialogue on a consistent basis, but I can always be accepting and curious and non-judgmental. But I have to have conviction. I have to have a belief that we cannot accommodate every request from every person. regardless how tall or short they are. We have some great things that your family is responsible, actually, for. The American for Disabilities Act, which is an incredible accommodation that we've created dignity for so many people. So it's a balance. I don't know how to answer that question. We don't accommodate tall people on airplanes or hotel rooms, but we do accommodate people with physical disabilities. And so where do these lines draw? Mike's can answer that.
We make every doorway 7 feet.
There you go.
So I actually think it is let's just talk about where society is at. We are in a postmodern society, which basically means that we've kind of gravitated towards this idea that as you're exposed to the marketplace of ideas, and there's so many different ideas, and often these ideas pull in different directions that we who can know what can be true? We're just going to instead opt out of trying to make that decision and say whatever is true for you is true. The problem is it doesn't actually work at any kind of like a societal level. And I think that's what we're struggling with, is that is not a sensical way that you can, govern and lead a business. So it's a total cop-out to say, I'm not going to publicly hold any position that someone might find disagreeable or offensive. It would actually be like a repudiation of my faith to do that. So I think it starts with, if you really do believe something, then it is important that you're willing to stand for it. I think the second thing is the way that you stand for something that you feel strongly about is very important. And unfortunately, our country, from my perspective, has drifted to a place where if you think you're right, you are justified in being nasty. And that is really unfortunate. And that's another way that my faith would intersect this. Jesus said, you've been told, hate your enemies, but I tell you, you should love your enemies. That if somebody asks you to go 1 mile, you should go 2. If somebody slaps you on one cheek, you should offer them the other cheek. He presents this extremely countercultural idea. Throughout all of human history, regardless of whether you're a Christian or anything else, the idea has been the people that treat you good, you're nice to them. The people that treat you bad, you're bad to them. And Jesus provides this really radically different, regardless of what you think about Christianity, point of view of no, what if you treated everyone as having value and dignity, simply because they're made in the image of God. And so obviously that maps to this. That yes, there's going to be issues that I have perspectives that other people disagree with. But I'm never justified, even if I think I'm right, I'm never justified in treating other people with anything less than grace and kindness and love. I mean, actually the central theme of the Bible is that we are like problem children that God is infinitely gracious and patient and kind to, even in the fact that we're very disagreeable often to be around, and that's our model, that we want to treat other people the same way. So I think how we take the stands that we take matters a great deal, and unfortunately we've fallen into a trap. The final thing I would say is I wear my motivations on my sleeve. And other people don't have to agree with my motivations. But I think it's very powerful when you find things that you can rally people behind that don't have to share the same motivations. So as a simple example of this, I have a conviction. I've started a company. We do hundreds of millions of dollars a year in revenue. And I have a conviction that that's not all for me. It's just a belief. It's a belief that society, the world would be better if the people that hit the mega home runs in business felt a kind of social contract, a responsibility to be generous and to invest in communities and give that money towards others, right? Now that comes for me from the fact that I feel like that's the way God's treated me. I feel like in Jesus, God treated me that way, that I deserve nothing. He gave me everything. He was generous with me. I'm going to reflect that. But here's the thing. There's a lot of different ways that people can get on board with the idea of being generous, right? I don't have to share that motivation. I can be upfront with that motivation. But what's been really cool to me in the last a couple of years as I've become more active in talking about this and on social media is I've had so many entrepreneurs reach out that come from very different places on the political spectrum, on the faith spectrum, and say, what you are doing when it comes to giving is really compelling and interesting to me. And I've developed kind of a little bit of my personal mission is to unite people around this idea of the responsibility and opportunity that comes with generosity when you have a business. And sure, I have motivations that are rooted in my faith, and I will never run away from that. I'm happy to explain that to people, but you don't have to share any of that to believe that generosity is great for our communities, and it's the type of business that customers want to buy from, and that the world would be better if this is the way that things worked. And I think that that's when it's really powerful, is when we can find the things that we believe, and even if other people share different motivations, where they can get behind the same idea.
Let me toss you both a question I didn't tell you ahead of time about. And I'll give it some background. I'm interested in American political speech. And really from our founding, presidents have used rhetoric from the Christian faith pretty regularly. So Abraham Lincoln, in his second inaugural, spoke of the better angels of our being. One thinks of Ronald Reagan, who used the image of the heavenly city Jerusalem when he spoke of the city on a hill. One thinks of Bill Clinton here in his remarks and the scripture passages that he personally chose to use. One thinks of George W. Bush, who used religious language to craft his message about compassionate conservatism, and actually to say right after 9/11 that the object of our reaction should not be against the Muslim community. And then I happened to be there when President Obama broke into Amazing Grace at the funeral of one of our students who was assassinated in Charleston. And so all of those were examples of the use of very explicit rhetoric from those faith traditions. But I'm aware, as someone who preaches regularly, that when you're in the public square, you need to be careful about that and think about what you're going to say and about who's listening and how it's heard. You guys both are public speakers. How do you handle that issue of rhetoric?
Well, I think it's a great question. When I think about our country, we have a country where we have freedom of speech. And that's a really important freedom that we enjoy. And we have a history in our country of sharing our hearts in the public square. And when I think about our discourse as we move into an AI-generated future, where we literally, if somebody's recording this, Bob Ross, you can take my voice and record something completely different and have me up here on this same podium saying something completely different. Human truth is human truth. And every faith tradition follows some version of human truth. And I think we can speak human truth regardless of the situation, regardless of the audience, with intentionality, depending on the audience that you're in front of. And we can deliver the same message of love God, love your neighbor.
As yourself.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if this is controversial what I'm about to say, but I think that the issue is that often religious rhetoric is used to control people and manipulate people. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's why many in this country are so jaded towards it, because they've seen it. You know, they've seen people, whether that's from a pulpit or, you know, a parent or a leader at a school or whatever, use religious language, use particular rules to control and to manipulate. And that's really unfortunate. And it's not really a reflection on, I think, on religion or a particular religion. It's unfortunately a reflection on humans, and that humans will do this. You know, there have been some terrible things done in the name of God, in the name of religion. There still are today. This isn't new. And so I actually think the standard that we have to hold ourselves when we talk about faith, we talk about God, is one of sincerity. When we started the company, we really knew we wanted to be about generosity, but we weren't really sure how much we wanted to talk about it, and certainly like how much we wanted to talk about why we did it. And so for a long time, we just basically didn't talk about it. And then we kind of came to the conclusion that that was really a miss, that we should be talking about it. And there's a risk. There's a risk when you get in front of people and you say, yeah, you know, we run this business, we make money, that it's just this big virtue signaling. Like, you're just telling me that to try and get me to buy more of your water bottles, you know. And so I got asked that at a conference once, like, how do you walk that line? And more or less my answer is, the only way I keep on the right side of it is I ask myself, is it sincere? Not are we perfect, because we're not. There's no human organization that perfectly applies the principles it aspires to. But more, is this real? Is this sincere? Is this what we really want to be about? And that as long as that is true, I feel comfortable. I feel comfortable talking about my faith. I feel comfortable talking about why we do the things that we do, because it is authentic. But that's the check that I have to kind of put on myself. And I think that if we had more authenticity in how we talked about our faith, and it was less manipulative in nature, then probably it would speak even louder to people, and there would be more freedom for people to hear that without immediately being turned off.
I really appreciate you're mentioning sincerity and authenticity, because I'm recalling other conversations this afternoon about social media. Even before AI, the issue was sincerity and authenticity. Where does this come from? Is it a bot? Is it an avatar? Now, because of the tools of social media, there is no one it's coming from. It's artificial.
Yeah, I just want to hop in there and say, I think there's more of a thirst for purpose and authenticity than ever before.
I do too.
And the world is desperate for
Yes.
leaders that are honest and authentic and stand for something. You know, that's going to be the next wave. Postmodernism is a reaction to modernism, which was the idea that you could figure everything out in a test tube.
Yeah.
And a whole generation watched their parents and said, that ain't true. And guess what our kids are going to say? This whole idea that nothing's true and everybody's truth is is valid, that didn't work either. And I think where they're going to gravitate is, we're fine with imperfect leaders, but we want authentic leaders that really stand for something.
Yeah. Well, I think that sounds like a good way to end this panel. Usually when I finish talking, there's a offering plate passed. We're not going to do that here. Instead, we'll pass on to the next panel, but thank you for your patience.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to each of you for inspiring us to think, what are the values that drive us, and how is it that our deepest values can drive us to disagreeing better with one another. Thank you. So for our final panel, we're going to call back Governor Stitt and Tim Shriver, and we're going to add to it Joel Harder, who is among other things, the chaplain of the House of Representatives in the great state of Oklahoma. And they're going to be our final panel, and what they're going to do is set the stage for us, where we ask ourselves, okay, so what am I going to do different as a result of this? So we'll turn the time over to the governor.
Well, thank you all so much for being here this afternoon. I am the founder of Oklahoma Capital Culture, and we are a nonpartisan, non-lobbying organization that since 2018 has worked to shape a culture of civility, integrity, and servant leadership among Oklahoma's policymakers, and to empower all Oklahomans with resources and experiences and opportunities to recognize their ability to cut through political polarization and the incivility in our politics. First of all, thank you, Governor Stitt and Dr. Shriver, for hosting this summit and bringing us here together today for these conversations. In this final discussion, let's talk practical next steps. Current data from the research of More in Common in collaboration with Hidden Tribes shows that when asked whether, quote, the people I agree with politically need to be willing to listen to others and compromise to break through political gridlock. 2/3 of what the researchers call the exhausted majority say yes. And that's kind of what you were talking about with the starving majority. But this is what's very interesting from their research. A majority, 51% of respondents who identify on the wings of their political parties also say yes. So for the next few minutes, I'd like to ask you both how you believe we can actualize this desire of the majority of Americans into practical action. And Dr. Shriver, I'd like to start with you.
Oh, no.
In the time since the Dignity Index has existed as a resource, what changes have you seen in the dialogue of those who participate? And are there any specific examples or moments that stand out to you that you'd like to share?
Yeah, well, thank you. And I just want to, again, thank the governor and thank Judge Griffith and thank all the panelists. I mean, first of all, I'm walking out of here like much taller than when I walked in. I really am. Now, I'm not 6'9", but I you know, it's just a reminder. There's a lot of business minds in this room, right? So if someone were to tell you there's a market in this country that's about 190 million people, and they have no product, any half-witted entrepreneur would say, well, I'm going to build a product for them. And what I'm seeing today is a small sampling. I don't know if it's 190 million, maybe it's 220. I like starving majority because it implies a hunger, a desire, not just the exhausted, but their term, you're right, is exhausted majority. Look, we started the Dignity Index. We thought we were going to help people grade politicians. And we gave them this index. We gave a bunch of students the index, and we trained them. It took about a full summer. And we trained them how to use the index so that you could score objectively. I would score Kevin Stitt the same way a very conservative Republican would. Or I would score Representative Shriver the same way a very conservative, very liberal Democrat would. But I guess I'm mixing it up. Anyway, the point was we could be objective. I wouldn't score Trump low and Biden high or vice versa. We would agree. When someone says, for instance, we just scored the other day, the vice president, well, I shouldn't say the vice president, the vice presidential nominee on the Democratic side calling, I think, J.D. Vance weird. That gets a 4. Now, I wish it got a higher score because that I happen to lean that way. But that's a 4. It's a 4 when you call someone weird. If you have your card, you can look at it, and whether you like it or not, you'd have to agree. We also scored the, I'm going to just make a fool of myself here, but we scored the, what's the quote from Senator Vance about childless cat ladies. Okay. Now, I'm not picking on him. That's a 3. We had a whole group of people, and they said, yeah, that's a 3, and some were conservative. So anyway, what we wanted to do was give this, and the hope was that by scoring political figures, we would incentivize them to want to go up, right? Because if the governor got in the front page of the paper tomorrow a lousy score, he'd be talking to the speechwriters or his communications people. God's sakes, get me a better score for God. Figure out, and he's, to his great credit, actually done that. What we found is a little bit counterintuitive. Most people look at this and they don't really care much about politicians. You know what they mostly say? I gotta talk to my wife differently. Or when you're talking to young people, last Sunday my dad called. This Sunday I'm gonna talk to him differently. We call it the mirror effect. People see the capacity to be better. They don't just feel it or have faith in it. They actually can see it on this little card. I know it's just a little piece of paper, but they see that they could disagree and still treat them, and they actually want to. So one of our students said, she almost couldn't talk to her grandmother for years, and I tell the parameters of the story because it's very moving, but she said she decided to use the skill that's on the back of this card, curious, not furious, which many people pointed out. and go talk to her grandmother about the pro-life, pro-choice issue. The younger woman on the pro-choice side, the grandmother on the pro-life side. And they had this conversation, and she said, I want you to understand it. And finally, the grandmother said, you know, when I was 19, I got pregnant. And people encouraged me to end the pregnancy, and I continued. I didn't end the pregnancy, and that produced your mother. Now, this younger woman never had heard that version of her grandmother's position. It didn't change her political view, but it changed her relationship. Like that. Now, not every story is like that, but the capacity to use the skills tactically, I would encourage people, I'm going to let the governor speak in a second, but encourage people, if you have this card, to look on the back, because the back is the skills, and you've modeled this already, Governor, but the back is the skills to use when you're in a disagreement. It's a little bit of the gospel here. Someone said to me, this is 1 Corinthians 13 on the back here. How do you actually manage yourself when somebody triggers you? Like maybe I might have just triggered some people in the room with the pro-life, pro-choice thing because it's very deeply felt. So you might be feeling like, I don't like that guy as much as I did before. It's possible. I wouldn't fault you if you did. Look at the skills on the back and decide which ones you could use in a conflict and which ones you'd use first. That's a practical way we're encouraging our Students for Dignity, which is our national outreach to young people. The biggest uptake we've had so far is actually in businesses. It's not surprising you have business leaders here. We've had businesses asking us to come train their management teams, their new employee groups. We've trained 6,000 employees at one company in the Dignity Index because they want their corporate culture to model this. So there's a big hunger out there, and I think there are many, many stories of people who with just a little product to tap into their hunger are using it in very healthy and hopeful ways.
Thank you. Governor, you signed the Dignity Pledge in February of this year. What steps are you taking to implement the pledge in your day-to-day work in Oklahoma? I think Dr. Shriver's alluded to some of those.
Yeah, well, first off, I think it gives us a common language, and you can see, when I met Tim and he kind of explained this to me, and then we were talking about the disagree better, I thought, just like what some of our panelists have said, people are craving this, right? People are so in the fringes and the right and the left, but most Americans, most Oklahomans are right down the middle, taking their kids to soccer practice and piano lessons, and they want their leaders to model this. So when he gave us that language, we quickly signed the pledge, and we said this is something. We trained our staff, we trained our cabinet. We said, I told my communications team, let's look at all of our press statements. Let's make sure that we are modeling this. Let's not, and trust me, you get mad in politics, and they're doing this and they're doing that, and you want to call them a name, but it was really a good language for us. And so I think that's why we want to be here today, and I thank Judge Griffith for being here and Tim Shriver for modeling this for us, because we have to teach that next generation. So I'll give you an example. I'm a huge sports fan. We've got some Oklahoma State people in the room. Go Cowboys. I'm okay, Boomer Sooner. I see you guys too. But like, okay, if you're into college football, you sign up for a subscription to get your, to watch recruiting, right? So you pay $10 a month, and you're going to watch either the Volunteers if you're a Tennessee fan, or USC or OU or OSU. So you sign up for these to find out what great high school players are going to come to your university. Okay. Well, the last thing that they're going to push to you when you're a paying member of that subscription is negative news on your university, right? You want to know that your team's going to win the national championship. Everything's perfect. Everybody's a 5-star recruit. Your coaches are awesome. Well, that's the way media is feeding us now. Everything's pay to play. And so we're just feeding our bases, right? And we have to get out of our own element and listen. And that's why I loved, our conversation with Suzanne and all the different people. And this guy, you can see we like each other. And we might disagree, but we filmed some commercials together. And I'm going to tease him for a second. We're going to have dinner at the governor's mansion after this, and
I hope it's good.
And the chef, they were talking to me about, I guess, what are we having for dinner? This, and this. And he said, but Tim Shriver's a vegetarian.
I know.
And I was
in
like,
Oklahoma.
I
I don't admit it in Oklahoma.
well, that's what I was going to say. I was like, that may get him some votes in Boston, but that's not going to play in Oklahoma. Okay, we
I'll
eat
have
beef
a hot
here.
dog. I'll have a hot dog tonight if you want me.
But in all honesty, I mean, whether you're vegetarian or you like steak or chicken or whatever, we're all Oklahomans. I love what you said. I want to put an O behind my name that I'm an Oklahoman. We want to be top 10, and I just think when we model that, we talk about it, and when you break bread with people and you have honest conversations, just it's awesome what comes out of it, and you can see people's humanity, and you're not into corners, right? It's not Republican versus Democrats and this race against this race, or this opinion versus this opinion. When we can actually come together and it's human on human contact, it's amazing how much we like each other and what common ground we can find.
By the way, can I just say, I love steak. My daughter, when she was 12 years old, asked me to be a vegetarian, which I thought was going to last for a day. And she hounded me. Daddy, you can't eat meat. I'm like, okay, I can't eat meat. And anyway, that's the story. So
it's okay. You don't have to explain yourself. I've got a vegetarian.
I feel like the crowd here. I want to get out of here alive.
Yeah. Well, I love what is actually on display here. It's very evident that what is modeled here is the principles of the Dignity Index, how to disagree better, how to actually create what has been a common theme, I think, the rediscovering relationship, and how that becomes the center for actually developing the kind of rapport and relationship that y'all have and the ability to disagree better. The one thing I would add is we need to do this more. There's kind of a psychological aspect to this, that when people see modeled the kinds of relationships and dialogue that we're seeing today, you begin maybe just a little bit to believe more is possible. And then that becomes an infectious hope. And so that would be my contribution. I'm asking the questions, not answering them. But let's do this more. I've got a few questions to the both of you. And going back to that idea of relationship, my favorite quality of wisdom coming from the first century is that it is easily entreated. And a linguistic commentator described that as the willingness to listen to the views of another, wanting to be convinced. Not that you will be, but wanting to be convinced. And as I've thought about that is wisdom, what practical steps can others take to want to be convinced when they are in a conversation with someone with whom they disagree?
Well, I think, notwithstanding the ideal that comes from the first century and notwithstanding the lessons we get from places like Scripture, I think these are skills. And I think they require practice. And I think we underestimate the importance of practicing these skills. I come from a tradition that emphasizes the practice of silence daily. Some people practice prayer. Other people practice yoga or exercise. But these skills, to self-regulate, if the governor were to say something inflammatory to me about whatever, who cares what the issue is, I would have to notice my desire to fight back and call, like you said, call the other guy a name. That's natural. But to manage that, I have to actually have a muscle. So we suggest that children learn these muscles. This is kind of what you've been working on here in Oklahoma. Children learn the muscle to regulate. We say, for instance, assume positive intent. Sometimes if you just say that in a debate, even in a highly inflamed one, Governor, we're in a very, very strong disagreement. I assume you have a positive intent. Almost immediately, you can find at least the capacity to contain the disagreement and try to dig deeper into it. So I don't think we can just sort of say, hey, everybody be nicer. And I don't necessarily think we want everybody to be nicer, but I do think we want the skills required. we're in a different. We talk about postmodern and after postmodernism, right? The world. Here's the way I'd put it. We've always had tribes like the Sooners versus the Cowboys, right? Or the Red Sox versus the Yankees, or whoever it is. The Catholics versus the Protestants, violence, right? Black versus white, rich versus poor, gay versus straight. All these factions that have defined themselves to some extent by who they oppose. We need to do something that's never really been done, which is to create belonging, strong identity, without hating the other identity. Belonging, but not othering. I am a Christian or a Catholic, I'm Jewish. I will not other a Muslim. I'm straight, I'm not going to other people who are gay. It doesn't mean I don't belong to my church or my tradition or my club or my, Red Sox fan. Maybe I can other Yankee fans, but but it's a hard thing to do. So we're going to have to, I almost feel like civilization is asking us, maybe the gospel is even asking us, maybe the divine energies are asking us, I got a new challenge for humanity. And that is to belong to your own community, but no hatred to other people's community. I think it's a big one. I think we're going to have to really figure out how to do it. It's going to take some work.
Governor, I've seen you do this. How do you give us advice and counsel to listen to the view of another, wanting to be convinced by it?
Well, some of us have talked about it, but I think a lot of it comes from humility and just, listen, I don't have all the answers, right? I remember when I decided to run for governor. I'm a business guy in Tulsa, didn't know anything about politics. I had to Google when is the governor's race. I just started feeling a calling, and just the Lord and from my faith felt like the Lord had called me to run for governor. And I remember meeting with some of these, I won't even mention their names, but met with some of these politicians and these people that had big positions, right? And they're like, what do you know about this? What do you know about this? You got to do this. You got to do this. And I'm like, they left my office. And I turned to a couple of my team, and I'm like, I'm going to be terrible at this because they have all the answers. They know exactly what's going to happen. And I'm like, this is going to be terrible. I said, because I don't know how to solve the problems until I get the team together. We start talking about it. We start analyzing it. The situations that might need to fix today might need different answers than they were yesterday. And so I just think kind of approaching things with humility is really good. I loved what Tim just said, just that attitude of, hey, let me stop. If me and Sarah are having an argument, I'm assuming that she's approached it from the same, she wants what's best as well, so I need to listen to her. I know that, Suzanne wants what's best for Oklahoma kids, and she wants what's best for the levees in Tulsa. And so let me listen to her. And how is she approaching the transparency we talked about earlier? And so when you approach things like that, I think that just cools the temperature. So I love that teaching moment that you just gave me to remind me. In the business world, we'd say the 24-hour rule, right? You get an email, you'd never respond in 24 hours. Let yourself cool down, relax. That's something my former COO taught me is I'm going to, respond back to them. But having that attitude, in communications, I think is so important. Just taking a break, relaxing. Things are never as good as they seem. They're never as bad as they appear. They're somewhere in between. I have to say that to myself all the time as well. But anyway, you can see why I just think this guy is amazing and giving us this language. I just think it's unbelievable.
And so much of what the Dignity Index, as you've discovered, is doing is it's really identifying what's going on within yourself. And that's been a large part of what we've done through Capital Culture, is helping people identify where they are. My approach to the 24-hour rule was go ahead and just write that email in the moment. Don't send it, and actually make sure you delete.
Yeah, but you can make that
mistake. Make sure you delete.
Delete it? Oh,
make sure you
go ahead and type it, get it all out?
Send instead of save.
Make sure you delete their email out. And then when you go look at it the next day, you realize how completely off base and out of hand you were. Yeah. But that's just for me.
And if you do it, you respond. A lot of times you're like, I'm an idiot, because then you find other information out, and you're like, that was so stupid, Kevin. Why would you do that? And so taking that break, getting counsel, we always quote in some scriptures, but in a multitude of counselors is great wisdom. And so we don't have all the answers. We need to learn from others. And somebody even said it up here, having ears to really wanting to understand. I think that's so important.
I want to close with this because I know we got a reception and it's not good to stand in between people in a reception. But I want to ask you both this question. The cycle of incivility, often toxic tone of our public discourse, that's not new. Yet it is pronounced over the last 10 to 15 years in particular. What would you say to a person who is in their 20s? Maybe they're voting for the first time this year. This is just now when they're getting engaged, and this is all they've really known. When you think about the last 10 to 15 years have been like this, what would you say to that person?
Well, I'd say look beyond what the outrage industrial complex is telling you, because I think most people have seen other things. They haven't just seen toxic presidential campaigns and toxic discourse in politics. They've seen actually great leaders in their colleges. Look at the three people that were up here. They've seen great leaders in their schools. Look at their third grade teacher and their sixth grade teacher or their football coach. Look at the person who runs a small business in their neighborhood and how he takes care of, or mid-size, or a big business, and how generous he or she is with the way in which they look at the moms or the women in the church who are often not on the podium but actually taking care. So there are plenty of examples of alternatives that this generation has seen. In some ways, more examples than ever before. What they haven't seen is people in power doing this. And there is an issue here, which is a longer conversation, but I'll just throw it out because it's important, I think, that a power imbalance changes the dynamics in a disagreement. And people have said to us, and I even thought at the beginning of this work, let's just go to schools, get kids, But kids can't do this if the people in power are constantly battering them, and that's what you're describing. They feel battered by the top. Which is why, sound like I'm going overboard here, which is why it's so important that people in power ask questions. Not just the power, because to say to the person who's getting the crap beat out of them, regulate before you debate, listen, assume positive intent, that's unfair. Even in our families, children are less powerful than parents. You can't just teach children to want to listen more deeply to their moms. You have to teach their moms and their dads and their uncles and their grandparents to listen to the children. So we need a generation of people in power who are willing to take the chance to lead with these values in order to allow the undercurrent of hope and aspiration and tolerance and welcome and good, deep, strong values and faith, let that current that is there rise. But right now it's there, but it gets crushed emotionally by the sense in which the powerful people are hateful people. And that's what we have to change.
What would you say to that young person?
I'm hoping that in the political realm, with things like this Dignity Index and what Tim Shriver's doing and the modeling, that we're going to see the next generation of leaders that aren't the flamethrowers, that we start coming back and having these honest conversations. But I would just tell them to look at, like Tim was saying, who are the people that you look up to, right? You shouldn't change when you get into these positions. Like, that's crazy. We always see it. Somebody gets into power and their talent sometimes takes them higher than their character can sustain them. We see that all over the place, whether it was a pastor that fell or whether this person or a politician. But I just encourage the young people, you just be yourself, and you don't have to be someone that you're not, and model after that high school coach or that teacher or that business person in your community. That's who I looked up to. My dad was a pastor in Norman, and I looked up to the business leaders that I knew that went to my church, and I just think we're idolizing the wrong things, and we're idolizing the wrong people. And so hopefully, as we keep modeling this, our leaders do become the statesmen that we want our young people to be modeled after. And then look at people like his uncle JFK and some of the statesmen that we've had in the country, and kind of think about them. And Ronald Reagan was my favorite president, and talking about those guys.
Well, it is a principle of capital culture that leaders do matter, that we look to leaders in times of conflict, in times of crisis, and when problems arise, we look to our leaders to solve those problems. And it is undeniable that leaders, such as yourself, will need to lead us out of this time of incivility and toxic rhetoric. At the same time, leaders have to lead in the environment in which the culture has created for them. It's a social contract, and so we all have a role to play. So it takes courage from leaders, and I am immensely grateful to you both, Governor, Dr. Shriver, for leading, and I look forward to where this will go in Oklahoma.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Thanks. Thank you, Governor Stitt. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Joel. We're done, sort of. I'm gonna turn the time shortly over to Susan Chambers, and then Dr. McAllister Wilson is going to give us a benediction. But there's one more thing we have to ask of you. On your way out, you will notice we've got a couple of stands. There'll be people directing you. We would like those of you who feel so moved to give us a statement about why you think it's important in your life, in our country's life, to disagree better. Because here's what we'd like to do with this. If you're game for this, a lot of people are going to be watching this. A lot of people watching it online. We're going to push it out so that more people than who are here today or online saw it. And the more people who can hear from your experience, your commitment to the things that you've learned today, the better it would be. So as on your way out, you'll see people who will show you where you can do that. Those of you who are online, you ought to be able to have something online that says where you can record your little testimony about this. Let me finish quickly, because we're over time. Let me finish quickly. So Judge Taylor and I have a unique perspective on all this. You've heard so many good reasons why we ought to be kinder, gentler, more listening, more humble. And there are thousands of reasons to do so. Can I share with you one that comes from my perspective? This is going to sound a little apocalyptic, a little dystopic to you right now, but right now our Constitution is in danger, and what it's in danger from is this contempt. The Constitution can withstand vigorous disagreement. It was created for vigorous disagreement, but it cannot withstand a citizenry that holds one another in contempt. Jonathan Haidt, the great social psychologist, said he predicted a catastrophic failure of American democracy. Why? He said, because you just don't know what happens to a democracy when you drain all trust from the system. And right now we are draining trust from one another. We'll get through this, I believe. Here's why. Because in the summer of 1787, Oklahomans know their constitutional history. In the summer of 1787, the Constitutional Convention was meeting in Philadelphia, and things were not going well. In fact, many of the delegates were packing their bags and ready to go, ready to leave. The convention was going to be a failure. And yet we know that 7 weeks later, in September, they pulled it off. They wrote the Constitution. One popular history of the time called it the miracle at Philadelphia. Now, I'm a Christian. I believe in miracles, but I think of a miracle as something that defies rational explanation. Well, we actually have a rational explanation for what happened in Philadelphia in the summer of 1787, because George Washington gave it to us. In a letter that he wrote transmitting the Constitution to the Congress, he said, "This Constitution is the product of that spirit of amity, mutual deference, and accommodation, which the peculiarity of our political circumstances rendered indispensable." The peculiarity of our political circumstances today render indispensable the same type of attitude that the founding fathers used to create the Constitution. If you and I want to support and defend the Constitution, it's about so much more than the rights that it protects. They're there, I'm all for them. But the Constitution, even more than the rights it protects, is about a way of approaching government with others. The Constitution created a new type of citizen, a citizen who's willing to listen, sit down at the bargaining table, and negotiate with someone. A citizen who acts in the spirit of amity, mutual deference, and concession. We've seen that displayed beautifully today. It's my hope and my prayer that we will all take that to heart and see that as the primary way we will support and defend the Constitution at this moment of peril today. So with that, I will turn the time over to Dr. McAllister Wilson to give us a benediction. Thank you.
Benediction simply means the good word. So I want to share some good words of sacred wisdom through the ages from the Hindu tradition in the 15th century BC. This is the sum of duty. Do not unto others that which should cause you pain if done to you. From 5th century Buddhism. Hurt not others with what pains yourself. From 4th century BC, the book of Leviticus. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against any of your people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. From Jesus in the 1st century AD, the gospel according to Matthew. In everything do to others what you would have them do to you, for this sums up the law and the prophets. From the Quran in 7th century AD. Not one of you truly believes until you wish for others that which you wish for yourself. From Black Elk of the Ogallala Sioux in the 1940s. All things are our relatives. What we do to everything we do to ourselves. All is really one. And from Clay Walker in 1999. Don't let the chain of love end with you. Go in peace.
So I'm just here to represent the memorial, and thank you all for being here. I'm Susan Chambers. I'm the chair of the memorial this year and next. And I'm also here as a very grateful citizen of the great state of Oklahoma for this opportunity to be here and listen. So thank everyone who came and spoke, those who moderated, and all of us who listened. I really appreciate it. One of the things that we believe here at the memorial is in better conversations. On the way out, you'll also get another little something from us about better conversations. We believe in it and practice it here at the memorial all the time. And, shameless plug, if you haven't visited our amazing museum and grounds, you have missed out, and it's shame on you. You need to do it. Thanks for being here.